Yesterday, I was taking a look at some of your accounts, and I also had a look through some of the comments on my YouTube videos. And there's a common trend. A lot of people are feeling a bit bummed out with Idle Heroes right now, for many different reasons, it seems. And DHGames, despite doing so many great things for the game, and giving us a ton of good events, have really been making some huge game design mistakes or business choices that have just been so poor that it's left so many people feeling a little bummed out in the game. So if that's you, or if you're curious as to why people are feeling this way, today we're going to be talking about some of the things that DHGames are doing wrong that are negatively affecting their players. Because someone needs to talk about this, and honestly a lot of you are thinking it. And bringing these things to the surface is hopefully going to make you feel a little more comfortable with how you feel, or enlighten you to just how bad things have gotten for a lot of people in the community. So let's go take a look. One of the biggest problems with Idle Heroes right now is, funnily enough, things like Void Campaign. Not just Void Campaign, but the nature of the beast. If I go in, you can see I'm stuck on 3 Gloria, 3 Oberon. A lot of people are actually stuck on this wave. It's quite a difficult wave. It's 129, and a lot of people are struggling to beat this. But it demonstrates a nature within Idle Heroes that often will make big amounts of progress and then we'll hit walls. And these walls take a lot more than what we have to break through. Now that in and of itself is totally fine. But when it comes in the form of what we find in the Void Vortex, you'll see that you only get as far as a certain wave, and even if you make it all the way up to, let's say, Vanquisher 2, you get kicked all the way back down to Vanquisher 6, and the difference between what is needed to clear through Defier and then clear through Vanquisher is so big that you then have to just grind and grind and grind to actually have a team that's capable of beating these various game modes. And even if you've made a little bit of improvement to get that one little bit further in Vanquisher, it doesn't matter because you're kicked all the way back to the bottom again. That same thing happens with Aspen Dungeon. You send in a team, you try and grind through, and before you know it, if you can't beat a certain wave in Aspen Dungeon, you're kicked to the bottom and you have to wait until you have a more powerful hero. All of these different things, it's the same with Tower of Dream, it's the same arguably with Sealand. All these different things hold you back. And you're left going, right, I need to build a team. I have to build something properly that's able to come in and beat these game modes. Now that on its own is fine. But when what you need is so far away and requires so much grinding as a free-to-play player, or spending as someone who's prepared to spend money, you start thinking, what's the point? Because as soon as you beat that thing, you just reach a new checkpoint where you're in exactly the same place of, oh, well, I guess now I wait for 3 months until I make progress. There's no steady, continuous reward in this game. When you start the game, the void is locked, and it simply says, unlocked when you get an E5. That is brilliant game design, because it turns around and says you need an E5 to unlock this game mode. It means that new players say, how do I get an E5? Or what is an E5? How do I build one quickly? Where do I get one? All these questions just come from that one simple sentence, unlock an E5. That's brilliant game design, because it says do the thing you're supposed to do and you unlock a thing. It is rewarding people for playing the game. But as soon as you get to that point where you have an E5, in you go to the Celestial Island, and you go to the Cloud Island. You start putting in people, and then you're like, all right, maybe I want to experiment with different Void 4s, and you realize that to actually take out a hero costs 1,000 gems. And you're like, oh, well, that's weird. You go to Star Expedition, and to actually tune up a team to be aggressive, you'll probably have to change things around, like imprints and stuff, and maybe you want to adjust your tenants slightly, but to go ahead and change your imprints, oh, that's 500 gems as well. So we're getting punished for changing things on our heroes. And that, in and of itself, is bad game design. Because surely the game should be rewarding you for playing. But instead, it's charging you for experimenting, it's charging you for mixing things around, and it's charging you for smartly using your resources. So what's that going to do to a player? It's going to make them not want to move their imprints, it's going to make them not want to change things, And it results in people just doing nothing on their account. It results in them saying, well, I don't want to make these adjustments because I don't want to waste my gems. And given that events now cost more and more and more gems to complete, people are even less likely to want to do that. To the point where lots of free-to-play players turn around to me and say, well, MK, I don't want to move my imprints around, so what's the best setup I can have by locking in my imprints? And I realize, oh, dang, that's a really awkward spot to be in, because I take for granted that I can move my imprints around, but not everybody can, and I realize it's a huge waste of gems. So the fact that the game is actively disencouraging players to adjust their heroes and experiment is just terrible game design. And add on to that the fact that the reward for each tiny bonus, whether it's doing a little bit more in Void Campaign, whether it's pushing a little bit further in your tenants on Celestial Island, these little things, it gets to a point where you say, why am I even doing this? What is the end result? And it just results in late game players getting bored because they're making such grindy progress for such little reward that it makes them get bored and lose interest, and ultimately either spend tons of money to try and spark their interest back or quit the game. One of the biggest grinds is a Transcendence hero. You need 5 million Crystals of Transcendence, and in that time, you just sit there going, well, I guess I can't beat this game mode now until I get another Transcendence hero, so guess I'm going to do nothing for 6 months. That is a very real thing that a lot of people go through. It's called the Transcendence Slump, where you go ahead and you build a team around one Transcendence hero, you push the team as far as you can go, and then you start going, well, who the heck do I build as an E5 now? Oh, no one? Because you literally don't need anyone? You're just like, oh, this sucks. You get your second Transcendence hero and you think, oh man, I could really use a third. This happened to the VIP series not too long ago, where I really wanted to build Fairy Queen Vesa, but I had Sword Flash, I had Halora, and I couldn't afford to swap either of them, so I just waited to finally get Vesa on the account. And you'd have seen when I finally did make the big switch and build Vesa, Jara, and Mystic Fairy Freya, I had so much fun in that week because there was so much to suddenly do. Why is the game not like that all the time? Why don't we have that much fun? Why aren't we being encouraged to experiment? Instead, it's do one big change and then have to sit still for ages because you can't adjust anything, you can't change anything, you can't muck around. And the grind takes so long to get something new on the account that it just becomes unbearably boring. And it results in people quitting, people stopping spending, and people are starting to get bored and actively voice that now. And what's worse is thanks to DHGames changing the prices on their packages to the point where now for a lot of people it's not affordable. Combine that with the cost of living crisis that's going on right now, where people's electricity and fuel bills are through the roof, where basic commodities like butter and bread and cheese cost more than they used to, that people are just like, are you kidding me? No, I'm not going to spend more on Idle Heroes. And that's the straw that breaks the camel's back for a lot of people to turn around and say, forget this DHGames, I am not spending money. And take a look at this. No purchasing. Tons of the biggest whales in Idle Heroes history all standing in unity to not spend any money until DHGames fixes this. DHGames are digging themselves a huge hole. Not to mention, when the Awakening came out with the Soul Temple, you have now a huge disparity between success and failure, where you can have people buy a ton of Starry Gems, go for Awakenings, and get nothing better than a C tier, and then someone just come in and high roll an A tier hero, sell it, and have a ton of progress. And people just think, well, what's the freaking point, man? Why are there game modes that you literally cannot beat unless you have something stupid that you've bought from the auction house that's got, I don't know, Giant Killer Sword Flash, maybe this bad boy right here? You know, it's an incredible hero, super strong. Go ahead and buy that, bro, right? Because Giant Killer, Defier, all these things make a huge difference. Look at this one that Jesus went ahead and bought, right? That was a Giant Killer, Defier, freaking SSS attack Sword Flash, the best Sword Flash the game has ever seen, and Jesus picked that up, and that's going to sell for as much as he bought it for. It's an absolutely incredible Sword Flash copy, but who on earth has got 135,000 Starry Gems to then go ahead and drop on something like this? Well, unless you're a massive whale, no one. And oh, Starry Gems now cost more than they used to, so that's going to screw over a lot of people even more. So it just results in a lot of people getting really alienated by the fact that even with money, certain things can't be beaten, and the only way to beat them is by spending a ton on Starry Gems and hoping that someone high rolls a copy and then chooses to sell it. So the game is in a really weird spot. And also, it's punishing people who haven't been playing for a long time with the existence of the Void campaign, because you literally need a whole team of Transcendence heroes to reliably grind through this. And it's just unfun. And it requires artifacts that a lot of people really need to invest in. A ton of splendid artifacts, crowns, demon bells, a mixture of all things, because you have to swap for different waves. That's what I realized when I was fighting this, is that certain artifact combinations do well against certain waves, other ones against others. Snow Heart sometimes needs to come in. Magic Stone Sword sometimes needs to come in. Sometimes you have to brute force it with Antler's Cane, maybe energy feed into a Jara. It just depends on what you've got. And then it comes to light that the freaking developers didn't even test the abilities of some of their Tree of Origin heroes, so that things like the Starwing Jara core that ended up being bugged, they're like, oh, sorry, we messed that one up, we're going to nerf it now. And unless DHGames brings out something that allows us just to swap cores of origin, then people are not going to be happy with where this has gone. Because I could message support and get this swapped to something different, but at the same time, I kind of like it. But if only they just released an event where you can swap cores, it would make cores more valuable. I said this when flags came out as well. Flags should not be faction specific. They should just be a generic artifact that does what it does for all heroes regardless, because having them faction specific is stupid. It's not even like a good business decision, because it just makes people less inclined to pick them up because they're not as useful. So it just really, really bugs me out that they've made some really weird choices that just don't seem sensible from a game design standpoint, and they don't reward players as we'd like to be. In fact, it feels like we're being punished. It's, oh, you bought a core? Whoops, we made a mistake. Oh, you want to change your heroes? Well, it's going to cost you soul symbols, and oh, it's going to cost you a ton of gems as well to move your imprints and your homeowners around. And oh, if you want to optimize yourself for different game modes, you constantly need to switch stuff around, but ha ha ha, that's going to cost you a ton of gems, so if you don't have gems, you can't play the game. It just seems like a stupid bit of game design, and honestly, I'm not surprised that people are being sad and people are quitting. There are so many ways DHGames could make this better. They could make it much easier to move heroes around. They could get us to swap things. Like, give us choice, give us flexibility, allow us to play the game. Because as it stands right now, endgame players are not being encouraged to play the game. They're being encouraged to just sit there, hoard resources, and wait until they can do the known clears. And people that want to experiment, that's nice for some, but other people don't like the risk that comes with experimenting because it costs a ton of gems right now. People would have so much more fun and do so many more interesting things if DHGames allowed us to do weird things on accounts without it hurting our progress. They're literally designing a game that doesn't encourage creative thinking, and it doesn't encourage fun and pioneering discoveries, because to do them, you lose out. And I'm really worried. I'll just be honest, I'm really worried, because people are now actively saying they're bored. People are now saying, I don't want to spend on this game anymore. And all it takes is a week of going cold turkey to think, wow, that was a really nice week I had, not being so addicted to Idle Heroes. Huh. Maybe I should just quit. Maybe I should just give my account to someone and let them look after it for a bit and just not play for a while. Because that's how it starts. And then suddenly you go, wow, my life is so much better now I haven't played. Guess I'm going to go. And there's an account we're going to be looking at next week that belongs to a guy, you might have heard of him, called GDP. He was one of the biggest whales, and then he went free to play, and he said he's had a ton of fun just being free to play. And isn't that worrying? That people wake up and go, actually, spending isn't getting me anything apart from an immediate progress boost, and then I'm stuck in the same spot, which is just a wall which is constantly staring at me. It doesn't matter what that wall looks like, there is always a wall. There's no constant, continuous desire or progress that's coming through. There's no steady gain. And the fact that you can just burst through to these walls and just spend and blast your way through and just end feeling unsatisfied because of all the spending you've done leaves you feeling bummed out. And if a free-to-play players, the grind is huge. And I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. I know that's often what you sign up for an idle game. The grind. But the fact that there are things in this game that we can do, and even that feels like a punishment because it requires us to move stuff around and experimenting isn't as satisfying as it used to be, just really kind of makes me feel sad. Because there are things this game does right. But as it stands right now, a lot of people are starting to realize there's a lot of things the game's doing wrong as well. And at some point, the wrong is going to outweigh the right. And I'm very worried that the spending crisis we find ourselves in right now could be the final thing that causes a lot of people to quit. because people have started saying they're thinking about it, and that's the beginning of the end. Now, I don't think for a minute that I'm going to quit, but I'm seriously considering going free to play. I don't think for a minute that I'm going to stop making Idle Heroes videos, reacting to accounts, and doing all the fun things, but am I having as much fun with the VIP series? I was, when I switched to Vesa, Jara, and Mystic Fairy Freya and tried something new, but the honeymoon phase has passed. I'm now back at a wall, grinding and grinding, and it seems no matter what you do, there's always a new obstacle. And rather than there being little drip-fed rewards, it's just constant grinding. And it gets to a point where you start thinking, why are we doing this? And that's the most important question. Why are we doing this? Because we play for fun. And if you remember, a long time ago, PvP was balanced. That was the goal, to have a team of 6 E3 or E5 heroes, whatever era it was, and allow them to compete with other peoples. There was no Celestial Island, there was no Awakening, there was no way to make a hero endlessly powerful. There was a limit to how strong a hero could be, and that meant PvP, regardless how much you spent, was always attainable to be something you could do competitively. Wales could still build a ton of teams in Interdimensional Arena, and that was their playing ground, but with the Crystal Crown League, you could build a nice team of 6 heroes and not spend too much money, and eventually compete with Wales. Free-to-play players could play for many years and finally build that amazing team and sing great songs of how they finally got there and were beating Wales. But now, because we're in this fruitless grind where we get more and more and more and more and more, and even for Wales, it's a non-stop push, even through this new campaign mode we have, because there is no flat ceiling, because there is no stopping point that is actually realistically attainable for any player, there is no balanced PvP, because there is no equal playing ground. There needs to be a bench. There needs to be an end in sight for a grind to be worth it. There needs to be a goal. And that was why Idle Heroes was so successful 2, 3, 4 years ago, because the goal was a competitive PvP team, regardless how much you spent. But now that that's non-existent, more and more people are falling and dropping and deciding to quit the game because they slowly realize the only thing that was fun has been taken away from them. Myself included. That's why I quit my first ever account, because PvP disappeared. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. This was more of an opportunity for me to just voice an opinion. It's not objective truth. It's not what you should believe. It's just me putting a viewpoint out there that a lot of people have been expressing to me, and I feel like I can echo and add some thoughts onto as well. If you feel like the game's got you feeling a little bit bummed out, or has you feeling bored, or like you don't want to spend anymore, let us know in the comments section. Let's make this an opportunity to almost have an agony and therapist moment where we just sit in this comment section and talk about things the game has done right, things it could improve on, and what we want for the game. Because if you're watching this video, and if you've made it to the end, you probably love Idle Heroes as much as I do. And the last thing we want to see happen is the game to fall apart because of mistakes that are being made by neglectful developers. In fact, I would argue DHGames are trying to do too much. They're like a kid who is rushing an essay and making a ton of grammatical errors, and their point just isn't getting across. I would rather DHGames slowed down what they're doing, stopped bringing out rushed events with rushed heroes, untested content. It's just not good. It feels like a lot of the things they're doing just happen. Like that price change thing came out of nowhere. Talk to the community. Work with the community. You don't have to be pushing new ideas all the time. Because what I see is when people start pushing out a ton of content, it arguably means they're panicking, or they're not doing as well as they were before, and they think they have to do more and more and more to recover. Whereas in fact, we as consumers, we want good content, not rushed content. And I see this with YouTubers as well, who spend more time trying to make as many videos as they can, rather than focusing on the quality or integrity of their content. There are times when people make stupid mistakes and are so addicted to making an amount of content that they forget what actually matters. And that's the community and the actual quality of the content it is that you're making. And in the case of DHGames, I'm a little bit worried, because I think they're putting their profits first and their community and content is coming on the wayside. That, or they don't even know what their community wants, which is even more worrying. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I'll see you next time, and happy idling.